0.1 Bitcoin just sounds like so little. 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be like, what? You have 0.1? You know, like that's so insane. Like, how can you have 0.1? Yeah, that 10 million, it just didn't seem like at all possible. That just seems so ridiculous. But every time you think a number is unreachable, Bitcoin just...
Mr. Jimmy Song, thank you so much for joining me and being a playable character once again here on the show today. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I like being on the show as a playable character. It would be sucky to be an NPC here, I guess.
So for those of you who don't know, really quick, Jimmy wrote, he's done many things, helps on the back end of Bitcoin. We're going to talk about that a bit today. And he wrote the book, Fiat Ruins Everything. So he's been in Bitcoin for a long time, longer than most people you're ever going to see or talk to. So he's the perfect person to talk to today about a lot of things that are going on, whether it's some of the civil wars going on inside of Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, what the Trump administration is doing with the macro in Bitcoin, what global entities are doing with Bitcoin. So Jimmy is the man here today. So I want to start with Michael Saylor though. Saylor, obviously what Strategy is doing, and this playbook that it's taken them a few years to kind of, like, I don't know if perfect's the right word necessarily, but they're starting to see the tools that are available that they can start engineering products with. Where do you see Saylor, Strategy, Master for the ticker if people want to know that, MSTR, and then some of these other companies? We had 7 like last year, and now it's like 70. Are we gonna have 700 companies in Bitcoin next year? Like, what is this looking like for you when you sit back and kind of zoom out?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are essentially running Strategy's playbook, right? Like they were really the pioneers here of sort of creating these financial instruments for investors that really couldn't get into Bitcoin proper. Anybody in retail had the privilege of sort of front running a lot of these large companies that had all these regulatory hurdles. For example, just like figuring out custody, for example. When you have assets like this on your balance sheet, how do you custody them so like no one just kind of runs away with it? That's actually like a pretty big problem. And it's only one that got solved kind of by having Coinbase essentially custody for a lot of these players, or Fidelity or something like that. And that allowed a lot of retail to front run them. But as of something like 2020, 21, Strategy has run this really brilliant playbook, to be honest, where they're acquiring Bitcoin, not just with the cash on their balance sheet, but through debt facilities. And we know that the way the dollar works is that any qualified borrower can essentially get as much money as they have in assets, right? Like that's how the fiat system works. If you have an asset worth 30 million, you're going to be able to get pretty close to that in loans, and you can leverage that to essentially buy more of it. And this is what Michael Saylor has been doing over and over again. But then it turns out that there's a lot of other parts of the economy, of the financial market at least, that want more facilities like this. So, for example, all of the MSTR options have been some of the most traded options in the entire world. And that's because of MSTR's extreme volatility. And the way Michael Saylor explains it is that we're giving the market what they want, because pretty much everything else has been squeezed of all of its juice, right? Like all of the volatility, all of the risk has been essentially squeezed out by the Federal Reserve. They've either de-risked it to some degree by buying up insuring things and buying things up and things like that, and lowering interest rates and making debt available. So about the only thing that is left that you can squeeze any juice out of is the Bitcoin yield. And that's essentially what MSTR Strategy has done, is they've taken all of this juice, and they're now making it available to the market. Now, they've been doing it, and they've been so successful. They're now like the 89th or like largest company in the S&P 500, and they're not even in the index yet, right? Like, imagine if they get into the index, how much crazier things get there. but they've been qualified for something like 230 days now for the S&P 500. But like, for whatever reason, S&P 500 is not including them into their index yet. But there are lots of other companies that are running the same playbook. We had 2 launch in the last couple of months. One just yesterday. Or is it today? I think. But last month we had 21. This is the company that Jack Mallers is the CEO of. But they're basically running the same playbook, but without this other thing called like a normal business underneath, which is what MicroStrategy has had, right? They owned a lot of domain names, they did a lot of consulting and stuff like that. That's nominally their business, but they've become just basically a Bitcoin facility for financial markets. And 21 is supposed to be a pure version of that. There's no need for this other business or whatever. And the other company that came up starting today is Nakamoto, right? The Nakamoto Holdings. They merged with a ticker, I think KNDY, DY or something like that. It's Kindly. It's like a medical devices company, but they're basically turning this small medical devices company into a Bitcoin holding company. So the way I see it, this is kind of like Bitcoinizing the stock market, right? Because all of the juice, all of the yield, all of the value has essentially been squeezed out by the bankers. It's the investment banks, have mostly squeezed out any yield that's actually possible. So the only rise in stock markets at this point is just the amount of money that's being printed, which is still plenty, to be fair. But now you have this other juice that's even better. That's way better than the rate of inflation. So it's like, okay, now everything is, sort of taking on Bitcoin's qualities. And I never thought it would go this way because, the stock market has been sort of like a substitute for store of value for so many Americans for so long that I thought, okay, well then, people just sort of convert over to Bitcoin. I never imagined that the stock market would itself Bitcoinize. And that's essentially what's happening because all of this money, like because of the yield that MicroStrategy is getting, or now Strategy is getting, and like the long term sort of prospects for it. Imagine if Strategy does this for 5 more years, and you get outsized returns for 5 more years the way that they've been getting. Well, then like who's going to hold some company that's like number 200 on the S&P 500? Why would you do that when you have this other stock that's like way better? And who's going to hold Google, who's like losing search, supremacy or whatever to AI things? Like, why would you do that when you have something that is like a way better asset? The longer this goes on, there's a virtuous cycle here that's going to just absolutely take over the market. And that's honestly the way I see things going, is that the store of value premium that most stocks have is starting to find its way to Bitcoin via these stock market vehicles.
Do you think that MicroStrategy or Master Strategy, do you think they're going to suck up a lot of the air in the room? I guess liquidity in a way. I mean, I feel like crypto, from crypto, because I feel like a lot of the crypto stuff, like the degens, all these people trying to get alpha, they're trying to do whatever people are doing, whether they're scamming or they're just like legit, like, hey, I'm broke or whatever it is. I'm trying to make a bunch and then maybe I'm saving in Bitcoin or whatever it is. Do you think that strategy and what Saylor is doing and now what these other companies are doing, like you said, whether it's a GameStop or whether it's, Jack Mallers or, a litany of people that are coming now, as Dr. Jeff was saying earlier, like this raft of businesses and people now coming and seeing this trade, does it suck up a lot of the air out of the room of these cryptos that we've been seeing for now for 5, 6, 7, 10 years?
Yeah, the altcoin market is pretty much dying, right? And you could see it like almost like just with the price. You go to CoinMarketCap and look at the 1-year returns on most of this stuff. It's abysmal, right? Like you have I think the best performing ETF on the market is like double short Ethereum or something like that, right? Because it's gone from like 4,000 something to like 2,000. It's done horribly. So the air is getting sucked out of them because the pump and dumps are being shown to be what they are, right? Even like the VC ship sailed way long ago, and you had meme coins come in this cycle, but they've already almost entirely
They're like
played out.
busted almost, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're going to gamble, why would you gamble on, you know, like rare Pepe Bitcoin or something, whatever, instead of like you know, micro strategy option? Like
Right.
the latter has
A
way more
business. Yeah.
liquidity, right? And you why would you go with something that's very low liquidity and like very based on insider games? At least you know that the games with, you know, micro strategy or, you know, Bitcoin ETF or whatever, those at least you know the rules of that. It's more or less fair. It's not sort of based on inside trading or whatever. And you could get significant leverage and you get way better liquidity. So it's based on a bet that you know kind of the odds are, if at least you subscribe to the Black Scholes formula or whatever. You can figure out like where you can get an edge, and it's not based on insider trading games. It's just, okay, well, here's this asset and here's where I think it'll go, and you know, you can do that. But I mean, I never thought that that was that big a market in the first place within all of this stuff. You know, the people that were really driving it, at least in the past, were the VCs, and they were the ones that were
Yeah.
pumping a lot of these tokens. And honestly, they lost the plot, I think, after about 2021, 22 or so. You know, they had a few sort of like very high profile failures. I think the first one was BitClout. They launched it. They raised a ton of money, but like nobody went into it at all. And then the other one was WorldCoin, which was like, again, lots and lots of money raised. They had a big name behind it, Sam Altman and everything, and went absolutely nowhere. And you know, this is sort of, they're kind of forced to do it because they've raised a lot of LP money and they have to deploy it somehow, and they raised it based on being a crypto fund. But you know, I mean, the thing is, they would have been much better off just buying like MicroStrategy stock or straight Bitcoin than any of this stuff. So yeah, even the VCs are getting kind of like jaded on this stuff. Retail is definitely jaded. The insiders are jaded. Everybody in altcoins is just entirely jaded, and the only thing that's really flying is Bitcoin. So, you know, that's a development that I expected way earlier. You know, when I got into this space back in 2011, and like, you know, saw what was happening in 2013, I'm like, okay, there's no way anyone's gonna buy Ethereum. I was wrong about that. And it turned out that like you know, Ethereum had like legs that ran for 10 years rather than like one or two, which was what I expected. And you know, the ability to just come up with like a new sort of scam vehicle was kind of astonishing, honestly. Like it went from like World Computer to ICOs and NFTs and DeFi and Web3 and, you know, IEOs and all this metaverse, whatever. Like they kept coming up with stuff until the point where they just completely lost trust everywhere in the market. It's been 10 years and they still don't have like a legitimate use case. And that seems to be you know, it takes a while, and 10 years seems to be about the limit. And you know, they're now going down and Bitcoin continues to go up. And yeah, it's the gamblers have that aspect, but really it's the people that are saving, including corporations and including, you know, people that just want some predictability going forward. They just don't want their money stolen, right? And that's why most people in the fiat economy are forced to invest, and that's where Bitcoin shines, and that's where we seem to be right now.
Do you think that do you think we have, you know, again, obviously the prevailing, you know, Bitcoiner thought over the last, you know, I don't know, I guess call it 6 months or so, really maybe say since Trump got elected, is, you know, had like the price bump, obviously, and then it just been going sideways and everyone's just getting so antsy, and there's so much good news. There's so many things going on. Why is price not higher? You know, what do you think that there's a paper Bitcoin problem? Do you sense that? Is there anything, you know, that we may not know? What do you think when it comes to, because again, that's that prevailing, like, hey, why isn't that higher? And then you're starting to see this paper Bitcoin thing creep back into the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been a problem in Bitcoin. Like way back in 2013, you know, Mt. Gox had a bunch of paper Bitcoin, and that had probably more trading volume than any other exchange or, you know, even ETFs today. and back then as a percentage of the Bitcoin trading volume, and that was a giant problem, right? And it turned out that they were insolvent, and essentially that caused like a crash. We were going up to like 1100 or something like that towards the end of 2013, and then the Mount Gox news essentially like crashed it. So I mean that's always a problem, and I don't think you can really get away from that. There are people that are um, going to trust different players at with the idea that they can make more yield or something like that. And we seen that for a long time. And I guess the more recent one is something like FTX, where they were promising better returns or something like that, and you can get FTT tokens if you deposit or keep it here or something, and you get weird dynamics. And it turned out they had paper Bitcoin. Now, is it possible that the ETFs have it? Maybe. I mean, like that's been the rumor around gold for a long time, and we're seeing something like a bank run on the gold market, and I think that's why you're seeing the bank gold price go up. Is that a lot of these institutions are taking delivery of gold, right? Like I think for a while there were like 7 giant gold vaults that had a significant percentage of the world's gold, and they were like, okay, is this all gold that's actually there, or are they like, just like, is it paper gold or is it tungsten or what? Like they didn't know, so they were taking delivery, and now we're seeing sort of like a truer reflection of gold's price. So if there is like too much rehypothecating, if there is like paper Bitcoin out there, I think we'll find out, though it'll take some time. Now, is that what's exactly happening right now? I suspect not. Perhaps because just given the history and the demand side of the equation, we're seeing actually not that much demand from retail. And traditionally, what's happened is that when you see like Google search results for
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin go up significantly, that's when you see like the real frenzy happen. But we haven't seen that. A large part of the buying actually is institutional. It's MicroStrategy, it's MetaPlanet, it's those other type it's hedge funds and stuff like that. So it's entirely possible that those will be the ones driving this one, but I don't think the frenzy has really started. And you can almost viscerally feel it when things are going better. And I mean, we were talking before on the show, before we got on the show, about how your views are going up and stuff. Well, that's generally what happens
Mm-hmm.
when you enter a bull market, is that views start going up more and more. And this is something that Andreas Antonopoulos told me when before I published my first book, because we had the same publisher. He was like, you know what, like, I've tracked everything with the sales of my books, right? Like my appearances and like speaking engagements, all this other stuff. He said nothing correlates better to my sales numbers than Bitcoin price, right? And that's been true of almost everything. And you'll kind of see it, and you can viscerally feel it, because random people that you haven't heard from in like 7 years will suddenly contact you and be like, hey, like I know you're into Bitcoin, let's talk, right? There are little social cues that come up where you'll see, okay, now it's a real bull market. I haven't had that this time, at least not yet, and I suspect we will, like in the next 6 months or so. But so far, those social cues, the sort of like environmental sort of like indications that something is happening, I haven't seen that many of those. And so, like, it's possible that there's paper Bitcoin. In fact, there's almost guaranteed to be at least some. But is it like a big part of the market that's suppressing price? I really don't think so. I think we'll see as this market cycle keeps going, that yeah, once the frenzy hits, you'll know, right? Like, because
Yeah.
your videos will get like way more
Yep.
views, right? Like your Twitter engagements will blow up, and like you'll get a lot more sales of different things, and the conferences will just have a lot more energy and a lot more randos and things like that. That's how, at least for me, in the bull markets that I've been in, that's how I've always been able to tell.
I think that's a great point. What do you think that there's like that, I feel like there's a dislocation in the sense of, like you said, I mean, like when you look at Google search results, there's, 2017 was like the ultimate for people searching Bitcoin, what's Bitcoin. And, that was like the first introduction for most of the world to Bitcoin in a sense, right? So that makes sense. But 2021 was like half of that. And then I think we've only got to half of what 2021 sentiment was. So like you said, is it a driver of, is it like more of a convert the king, and it's just going to be institutions buying going forward, and then the normies are going to get dragged along? I always go back to the American Revolution. 3% of people said, F off, I'm dumping the tea in the harbor, I'm getting my musket, and we're fighting you guys. And the other 97% were like, whatever, like who cares? But they benefited from that system that the 3% won for them. Is that what it's going to be with Bitcoin? Where, hey, the big guys are entering the party now, and it's going to get dragged across the finish line by 3% of weaponized autists, and then the rest of the world's going to get to benefit from that? Like, is that what we're looking at?
I mean, possibly. The thing is, like, I think most of the world actually doesn't have much savings. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So Bitcoin means like more or less nothing to them because they don't have any savings to actually store value in. So it's entirely possible that the people that actually have some wealth, they're the ones that are driving it, and it's probably not that many people, relatively speaking, that actually create the momentum, or that sort of change the rules of the game, if you will, or introduce a new paradigm. And who knows? Maybe it was in 2017 that we saw this entire frenzy, but it's entirely possible that that wasn't the peak. And I don't know. Google search results are a little bit misleading in the sense that, like, we know that Google has been going down as sort of like the place to go.
True.
I like, if we had better stats on like how many people are asking about Bitcoin on like ChatGPT or something, I bet you that would be a little bit better of an indication. But again, like you'll kind of feel it first before you consciously notice it. Is that like there are just more people noticing, like when you wear a Bitcoin shirt, hey, I know about Bitcoin, let's talk, or whatever. They bring it up in conversation when you're just sort of like at a party or something like that. And that's how you can tell. Or you're at a restaurant and there's somebody on the next table talking about Bitcoin or something like that. Those are for me the better indications of how much of a frenzy that's gonna get going. Like, who knows what this cycle will look like? Every cycle is a little different. I mean, it repeats in some ways. It does rhyme in some ways. It's not entirely like the same each time. But I suspect that we don't really have a clue what the magnitude will be, or like how crazy it'll get. It could be pretty mild. It could get like really crazy, just because once institutions get in, I mean, they just have so much.
Hold on 1 second. If you are holding your Bitcoin on an exchange still, or sharing your keys and your KYC information with a third party, everything you're learning about right now is completely moot. This is your wake-up call. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. Bitcoin is the first and only asset in human history where humans can actually custody entirely their asset. Custody sounds daunting at first, and believe me, it was for me 10 years ago, and I missed a year or two of massive gains, and I don't want that to be you. It's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbak and the Bitcoin Way. His team will train you to do it right the first time. We just interviewed Tony the other day, has 50,000 views, an unbelievable response. People love him and his story and what he has to share in his mission. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. So quit sitting on your hands like I did a decade ago and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/Brandon. Now back to the show.
So many interesting incentive, let's just say. Like, every CEO has some level of stock options that are a big part of their compensation. And if like buying Bitcoin for their balance sheet ups their price, guess what they're gonna do, right? Like, it's pretty obvious to me that most of them will be very incentivized to like squeeze it for all it's worth and find very creative ways to put more Bitcoin on their balance sheet if it comes to it, which Michael Saylor, to be fair, already has done. So he's sort of laid the groundwork and sort of blazed that trail already. But yeah, it's a strange kind of thing to be trying to predict, like how crazy will this get, because it's entirely possible it could get really, really crazy. I do agree that like most people at this point have probably at least heard of Bitcoin. It's so it's not entirely new to them, but you know, the understanding of what Bitcoin is, it takes time, right? Like I still remember back in like 92 or 93 was when I first really heard about the internet, right? Like Al Gore was talking about it on TV
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. This was when I was in high school. And then, you know, I got to college in 94 and I actually got to try. I'm like, okay, I had no idea what this actually was. Like I had no idea what the internet was. I had a conception of what it was years
Mm-hmm.
ago because somebody talked about it on TV. But until I actually got on it, and then like, you know, even up to, you know, 96, 97, 98, like, you know, as I'm doing more stuff with it, the internet itself was sort of evolving. And, you know, we saw different, you know, business models come into play and stuff like that. Like, you know, e-commerce became a huge thing and everything. And that slow sort of like understanding of something that you just sort of kind of get a glimpse of. I think that that's going to be more powerful for people as they realize what Bitcoin is actually for, because they've heard about it, they have some mental model of what it is, but almost assuredly their mental model is wrong. In fact, you know, all models are, you know, some models are useful, all models are wrong, right? Like, so, you know, as that evolves and as more people sort of get a better understanding of what it's for, I think there will be sort of like a frenzy and there will be more people coming in. The nice thing is that we've already had 16 years of history, and you know, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have downtime. There's all this uh you know, history that we can point to. We have a lot of resources, a lot of, like, if you want to understand Bitcoin, it's not going to be that hard for you, right? Go read like 3 or 4 books, go watch it, you know, 2 or 3 podcasts. You have a decent idea, and you'll get a good understanding of it, as long as you're, you know, sort of listening to the right people, I guess. But it's not that hard if you actually put a little time into it. And you know, it's getting to the point where it's worth doing that, especially as we get into kind of crazier sort of geopolitical things that we're seeing in the world right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to segue a little bit to I want to get your thoughts on you know, we touched on Jack Mallers briefly, but I would love to get your thoughts on, again, a little bit what they were doing, but also Tether. So Tether's in on that. Obviously, it looks like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Cantor is in on that, and Jack, and
Mm-hmm.
I forget the other entities, but I know Tether. So I would love to get your thoughts on just Tether and what, you know, because that's the thing too. People, oh, you know, Tether's, you know, that's a lot like the crypto crowd. A lot of people are like, yeah, well, Tether's the only thing propping up Bitcoin, blah, 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 blah. So I'd love for you to unpack this a little bit, just your thoughts on what they are all doing together, this new entity there, but, you know, Tether separately, but then also this new entity that they're creating. And again, kind of running this playbook, the Saylor playbook, and it's just happening more and more now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tether is basically the best run bank in the world, right? Like they
Yeah.
have something like $120 billion
It's wild.
assets under management, right? And it's just the dollar, right? That's all it is. And because they're getting like 4 or 5% on short-term treasuries, which is where they leave most of that money, they are making 4 or 5% off of the 120 billion. They have like 50 employees. This is basically what
Wild.
every bank would be, except like they make more money than any bank in the world, I think, or something
Jeez.
ridiculous like that, right? Like, so you have like a Wells Fargo or Bank of America that have branches all over the place. They have like Citibank, I think, has something like 210,000 employees, right? Tether has 50, right? Like, what the hell are all those
Jeez.
210,000 employees doing? Well, a lot of it is compliance. A lot of it is just like they merged banks like, you know, 17 years ago, and they have a room where they receive fax orders for certain stock trades, and they enter it into a mainframe, right, like that, in that same room. And there's like a room of 7 people that have been doing that for like 30 years or something, right? And they continue fund it because they have no incentive to economize or make things better, because in a sense they have a monopoly, right? Like they have
Mm-hmm.
a government banking license, and they're not going to get out competed, and if they really get in trouble, they'll get bailed out, like we saw in 2008. So they're like bloated messes, right? They're the 800-pound person that's just keeps eating McDonald's like 8 times a day or something. And so like it's no wonder that when somebody like Tether comes in, they absolutely destroy these people, right? You don't even have to be like an Olympic athlete. If you're just like a normal like 160-pound person, like you can outrun these people, right? Like that's basically what Tether's done. Now, like as far as like the entire like Tether conspiracy, and yeah, I mean, who knows what their books are like? We don't get to audit it, so we have no idea. But I will say though that they're probably on more solid footing than any of these other banks, like Wells Fargo or Bank of America or whatever. We know a lot of them were in deep trouble in 2008. They were, and some of them even like during the more recent stuff with treasuries going up, and they bought all these like long-term treasuries at like 0.5%, and if you mark those to like the current market value, they'd be underwater by many billions. But this is the reality, right? Is Tether is actually like a functioning market-based bank, and all of these others are like government subsidized like fiat banks that like got fat on government subsidization, and employ lots and lots of rent seekers. So you have that. So I think Tether's healthier than these other places. I don't know how much healthier. Are they rehypothecating? Maybe. I have no idea. I mean, they seem reasonably sound to me, and if their employment numbers are right or whatever, and they only really do have 50 employees, and they've obviously been making lots and lots of investments. Other than the Jack Mallers thing, they invested heavily in Rumble. They invested I think 10% in Juventus, right? Like the soccer club in in Italy. So I mean, they have lots of different assets. So I can't imagine that they're rehypothecating too much, right? Like I don't think they're interested in that business because their current business is just so profitable, and they're more interested in making Bitcoin better, as far as I can tell, and they're holding a lot of these conferences, and they're obviously funding this other entity 21 with Jack Mallers. And that seems to be where they want to go, is that they do hold some of their treasury in Bitcoin, and it's mostly off of their profit, from what I understand. So they're accumulating Bitcoin. So they're really profitable. So I don't think there's a reason for them to be rehypothecating. But yeah, which leads us to the actual entity 21. What are they doing, and why are they doing it? Again, I think it's largely a play to Bitcoinize the stock market to some degree, and give more vehicles for I guess different levels of risk tolerance by different investors. So if you're a pension fund, I think there are rules on how much of your allocation can go to certain types of classes of assets. I think if you're a money market fund, you literally can't invest in most things that are like, you can't invest in any stocks or anything. You have to do only bonds, and they have to have a certain rating and things like that. So by giving those types of players different vehicles that they can invest in and get some Bitcoin exposure, this is actually like helping a lot of them, right? So we knew for a long time a lot of these pensions were deeply underwater. So the California pension fund was like, they had to estimate like a 9 or 10% return every year in order to like actually be able to pay out their workers' pensions when they were due. But they were really only getting like 6 or 7% every year. Well, like you add an asset like Bitcoin into that, then you actually can get 9 or 10%. So this to me is like again, Bitcoinizing the entire market. It's making it possible for these pension funds to like meet their obligations and so on. And if that works, and they're providing these things to the market, and you have these giant pension funds. If they allocate even like 0.1% and it grows, well, they're going to allocate more, and trying to get the numbers that they need. And it's good for everybody, right? Like in a sense, but it does sort of like undermine fiat money, undermine the U.S. dollar specifically by doing that, because you're essentially making Bitcoin the asset that they're holding more so than the dollar, or dollar denominated assets, and that's a good thing. And I at some point I think it'll be such that these Bitcoin sort of based stocks or bonds or convertible debt, or I don't know, there's all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
Those things will take over a large chunk of the market, and you'll still have like the really high flying tech stocks and stuff like that, but like the returns on these are just going to be so good, right? Like where you're getting a compound annual growth rate that just like destroys everything else, that more and more people are going to come into it. And then once you have like 20, 30 years of history with Bitcoin, right? Like when Bitcoin is now 16 years old, if it's like 30 years old, I mean, who's like, I saw Katie Hobbs of Arizona said, "Oh, it's an unproven asset." I'm like, dude, Bitcoin is older than Zoom and TikTok and Moderna and all these other companies. What the hell are you talking about, right? It's better than like, you would have no problem if the Arizona State Pension Fund started buying like stocks of Moderna, but you're going to have a problem with Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin's actually older, right? Like it gets to a point where people start trusting it more, and then you're going to see just like a flood into it, right? This is what we've been waiting for. This idea of hyper Bitcoinization. I didn't think it would play out exactly this way, but it's through vehicles like 21. I think that seems to be the direction that the market is comfortable with, because they have to go through regulation and all this other stuff, and honestly, a lot of money is locked up in a lot of these weird regulated entities that make it such that you kind of have to hyper Bitcoinize this way.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I mean, I don't think Bitcoiners give enough credence to that part of it, right? Like once you kind of cross the chasm and you see the wizard behind the curtain, it is hard to go back into the fiat world and see things from that perspective. But there's also the legal side of it, where like legally there is so much money tied up, and just by the way, the nature of the beast, because like whether it's 401ks or pensions, like you mentioned, like it's just a lot, it's in there, and then you're taxed, it's penalized if people take it out. So there's just a bunch of cash just sitting there, and people can't do much, or aren't willing to do much with it, because they're like, well, what do I do? So, which is like Bitcoiners, there are a lot of Bitcoiners that won't spend any of their Bitcoin because they don't want to pay capital gains. Well, it's the same reason there's a lot of people that don't move their pension, or like they don't move their stuff because they're like, well, I don't want to pay penalties and capital gains. So we're in this weird like standoff, in a way. So do you think that MicroStrategy, Tether, some of these entities, 21 like these that are being built, do you think they become some of the biggest banks in the world? To that point, just made me think of it. Like, do they become the biggest bank in the world someday, just by the very nature, obviously, of Bitcoin increasing its purchasing power? And what do you think we're going to start really seeing some Bitcoiner services come this cycle, even where these services now being offered to whatever, buy your home through Bitcoin? CJ Constantinos doing the People's Reserve, and all these different things. Like, is the next 4 years here? Do you see that next 210,000 blocks, or I guess the less now? But what do you see this cycle in terms of these services being offered by these entities that are really growing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we've already have a lot of services, right? You can get loans from like Unchained or whatever, and Strike just announced that they're going to have a loan program where, I think it's like 50% loan to value, and you get it, I think 12% APR or something like that. I expect those rates to come down, because like if somebody has access to a money printer, then I mean, Bitcoin's pristine collateral, and, and you're hoping that they go bankrupt so that you can possess some of that. But yeah, I would like to see more such services. I would like to see
Yeah.
a lot of being able to buy a home and minimize capital gains somehow and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, it's definitely a lot of demand for this. But
Right.
that doesn't happen until you get to a certain price, and as price increases, then it becomes more and more worthwhile. Once you get to like $1 million Bitcoin or something like that, then yeah, it makes sense to, okay, well, if you have Bitcoin and you want to do real estate transactions, which I'm sure there are going to be a lot of Bitcoiners that
Mhm.
want to do that at like $1 million, then yeah, then whoever offers that service is going to have an advantage. And I would certainly love a real estate broker that knew all the ins and outs of like how to buy a house with Bitcoin, but I don't know of one, right? Like, but if
Right.
you know of one, right, or if you're a real estate agent and you're into Bitcoin, go figure this out, right? And like
Yeah.
become my agent, right? Like whatever it is.
Yes.
Um, but that's it's really kind of hard to know uh when such services are going to come online. I just know that as price increases, there's more wealth in the hands of Bitcoiners, so more services will be catered towards Bitcoiners in general. But yeah, it's you know it takes some time, and usually businesses are have regulatory hurdles and things like that they need to take care of. So it takes a few years for all of that to get going. So yeah, I'm not gonna guess that it'll happen in the next 210,000 blocks, but 5-10 years, I think we'll see plenty.
Okay, so in a few minutes, we're going to hit on the op return stuff, the core wars right now that are going on, and we're going to touch on price in a little bit too, and obviously get to that. I want to break that down with you a little bit, get your thoughts there. But really, I had one question that was a little more philosophical, and it's this thing that people seem to accept. Like ChatGPT is a great example, right? 2 years ago, or whatever it is, 2.5 years ago, it comes out, and people just like the most downloads, ever. And it's just like increasingly people just like, oh, new tech, like I'm just adopting it. Why is it that people have such a hard time with money? Money or Bitcoin, for example, using technology. I mean, it's a digital money, obviously native to the internet and native, with using technology to, in essence, use the money, right? So why is it that people have such a hard time with that? But like over here, it's like, oh, this new little fancy trinket. Like, yeah, I'm accepting that. My brain just accepts it. My subconscious just boom. There's no filter. There's no gateway or no gatekeeper there, and I just accept it. But with money, it's just is it just because it's so rooted emotionally and tied to things that people can't even explain, and they have a hard time just transitioning? Or what is it to you that makes people accept this? Just consumer tech so fast and so easy, but with money they have such a hard time.
Yeah, it's a great question. I suspect it's because you don't get sort of that instant feedback. So with something
Mm-hmm.
like ChatGPT, you give it a prompt and it answers, and it's like, hey, that's pretty good. And that feedback loop is almost instant, right?
Quick, yeah.
With a lot of tech, right? That's just how it is. Money, the feedback loop is many years, especially with Bitcoin. And if you are looking for instant feedback and looking at the price every day, you're probably not doing that well, right? Like it's okay. Well,
True.
it went up $50. I'm happy. I went it went down 500. I'm not happy, right? Like that's and you tend to store negative emotion a lot longer than positive emotion. So, um, it takes a long time for that to really register. And it's like with money, you're especially like using it as a long term savings vehicle, which most Bitcoiners do. It takes like 5 years right,
Yeah.
before you see the results. So yeah, it's not going to get the instant adoption that something that has a 5 second feedback loop is going to have. But at the same time, it's once you do adopt it, it tends to stick a lot longer. So something like ChatGPT, it was great, right? Like I used it when it first came out. I tried a whole bunch of things, but then like it started giving me kind of weird results when I would ask it like anything controversial, or I realized it was like skewing some of these answers towards a certain direction, and I didn't like that. So I was fine like switching to something else that was more my taste, or like that I felt like would be giving me better answers. So the feedback loop being short is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like on the one
Yeah.
side, you're going to get into it faster, but you can also get out of it faster. Whereas with Bitcoin, you get into it slower, but you're also going to get out of it much slower, and possibly not ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're really like holding for the rest of your life, which I think many Bitcoiners are, then why would you ever get out of it? So it's just sort of like the nature of the thing that we're talking about.
That's a great. I love that explanation. It makes tons of sense. Where do you fall in this balance between Bitcoin, the toxic maximalism and empathy? And I phrase like that because you get a lot of going back to the Saylor thing of it's a human system at the end of the day. So if humans don't adopt it, we can. Like there's this nuance you have to ride between toxicity and saying, no, this is the way it is. This is the way it has to be. And at the same time, trying to draw in the masses, whether it's converting the king and it's some sovereign or it's a nation, nation state or whatever it is. And just, your mom down, or whatever, or your neighbor next door. You can turn people off if you're using that toxicity and weaponizing it and just beating everyone over the head with it. But also if you're being too lax and saying, oh, whatever goes, then yeah, like you said earlier, you got to stay on top of these things, because if you just kind of let it devolve into whatever, then that'll be the case. It'll just turn into whatever. So where do you kind of draw that line between, hey, I'm strong and ardent and I'm toxic over here, but then I'm empathetic over here? Because this is a debate I've had with many Bitcoiners. I talk with Aladdin a lot at Bitcoin Trading Cards. We're always kind of going along this line of, with the cards themselves, you're trying to reach normies. I mean, we're in the Pokemon crowds, like it's starting to really grow in those areas. And a lot of people, they're like, who's the Bitcoin CEO? Like these people have no idea what's going on. But if you come across and they're like, hey, we're going to beat you over the head with toxicity, this is the only way anything can ever be done in life, then people look at you and you're like, oh, okay. And you've seen this throughout the years, right? So how do you balance that? I guess is maybe is the only way I can ask that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally toxic towards altcoiners, but I'm like there's like it's very hard to convert altcoiners, right? Because they in their heart of hearts, I think they really want to just like gamble, and I don't know how you get
people like the
them
casino.
to like
Yeah.
you need like Gamblers Anonymous exists for a reason, right? Like you need like
100%.
intervention to get people out of gambling. Your conversation with them is not going to convert them. So
some people like losing too, like literally,
yeah.
like that's why a lot of people go to the casino. It's like a stated thing, or whatever, like they've researched it. Like some people are just addicted to that rush of like losing.
Which is so strange, but
Wow.
that's what people are like. So with new people, I try to explain it, and very gentle, trying to explain what it is, and if they ask about altcoins, I'll explain what the difference is and so on. But the people that I'm toxic to generally already have an idea of what they want to do, and they're just being kind of purposefully ignorant about the facts.
Yeah.
So I'm generally toxic to those people, especially the ones that are hyper aggressive online. And I actually don't even engage with those people anymore, and haven't for many years. But I think just sort of saying what's true is normal and fine. And the thing is, like, the thing that Bitcoiners have going for them is that they've just been right, right? like people said in 2017, Ethereum is going to be this world computer. It's like, no, it's not. And then you like, okay,
Cutscene.
6 years later, it's like, yeah, you were right. Okay, like the truth tends to win out. So as long as you just like can show the receipts of having been right, like people I think eventually come around, or they can just keep losing money. I mean, some people, like, their pride is such that they're never going to be humbling themselves to come back to you, but that's okay. Like they'll learn their lesson some other time, or maybe they can't learn it. It would be nice if we had like Gamblers Anonymous like interventions for some of these people, and maybe got them to like just stop gambling altogether. Maybe even like don't do anything with Bitcoin, just like get your life back together. But for Bitcoin specifically, I think it's important to uh, push back against lies and to tell it like it is. Unfortunately, a lot of like altcoiners, like they kind of weaponize the fact that most people are nice as a way to sort of like slip under the radar and get you to say good things about them. And that's, I think, where a lot of the toxicity comes from, is you want to prevent that, because they're like, oh, and I agree, I love Bitcoin, blah blah blah, right? And it's like, okay, but that, like, liking Bitcoin doesn't mean that you're allowed to go get away with all these other scams and stuff. So that's where I think a lot of the toxicity in this community comes from, is because of that, like lumping together under the moniker of crypto. Hey, Bitcoin, or, oh, we're on the same side. Oh, you're into crypto, right? Like, it's, no, I'm into Bitcoin, and I need to make that very clear to people, just so, like, when I'm proven right later, that they know who to come to and say, hey, like, okay, yeah, you were right, and all this other stuff was crap, instead of like lumping us all with the same group of obvious, like, scammers and people that have been wrong the whole time.
I think the most incredible thing, I think it was maybe Nolan Bowerly years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I remember watching one of his shows or something like that. And he was just talking about how Bitcoiners, you have like the Fiat legacy matrix, and they're constantly wrong. I mean, you can, like, every piece of writing, anything they do, like, the Paul Krugman type garbage, right? Like, the guy's been wrong. Every time he hits publish, it's wrong, like immediately wrong. Like, it's just like obsolete. It's wrong. But it's like, your book, or if you go back to anybody, and it's like that book 20 years from now will still be, it's evergreen. Like, it's still right and will be right 20 years. And like, that's what Bitcoiners, like you said, have going for them. You made me think of that, like his quote of him saying that, because it's so true. He's like, dude, like, Pierre wrote, or Bitstein, or like, Jimmy's book, like, you can go back 20 years, in 20 years, you'll be able to go back and be like, oh yeah, all those things are true, and they still are today. It's wild. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, that's what the Nakamoto Institute is doing, right? Like, specifically, Pierre and Michael,
literally right now,
they're literally going through the articles that they wrote 10 years ago and saying, yeah, it still holds up, right? Like, and that, which is great, because like it shows that Bitcoiners have been right the entire time, and it's the altcoiners and the fiat people that have been deceiving you, and you should listen to the Bitcoiners, right? Bitcoin maximalists, the toxic people.
Insane, absolutely insane. Well, we have that going for us. That's amazing. You touched on a couple of things there. I want to segue into this. That's perfect. So, the Trump administration obviously has surrounded himself with, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, his kids, seemingly a lot of people, Sachs, a lot of these guys that are either understand Bitcoin to a degree, or crypto, or whatever it is. They're either on that journey, and they get it more than I guess the average politician has ever got it before. So let's go with that. Where do you see the macroeconomic, this geopolitical, games that are being played? We got wars all over the place. We've got, Taiwan semiconductor, shenanigans. You have unlimited things really happening. You have the India, Pakistan stuff going on. Where do you see these guys in this? Is it 3D chess, 4D chess, 5D chess that they're playing? Or are they just, are they trying to revalue the world monetary system, kind of not underneath everyone's nose, but are they trying to revalue against hard assets, laying the groundwork for Bitcoin or gold? Like, how do you see this whole thing playing out? I mean, it's seemingly the wildest time I think any of us really have witnessed before. How do you see this? Let's unpack this for us.
Yeah, so the current sort of policies of the Trump administration, I see as sort of like trying to reverse some of the fiat decline that we've had for the last 55 years or so, right? Like 1971 Nixon shock, that was obviously like a big point at which, like, a lot of things diverge. You can go look at WTF happened in 1971 to see all the different charts and the growth of the administrative state and everything else. What really, like, kind of became crazy after 1971 is that you made global trade, it made it so that corporations in the U.S. became really multinationals, and they went abroad to go get cheaper labor. So you saw basically a lot of human labor requiring manufacturing leave the United States. And for the last 25 years or so, China has taken up most of that, and we've seen a lot of the manufacturing go over there, and a lot of the U.S. has transitioned more or less from a manufacturing economy. It was like number one in the world in manufacturing of all kinds, especially around World War II for a lot of obvious reasons. To a point where we're now basically kind of a services and finance economy, right? Like it's not, if you're getting a job, it's usually services related. You're like working at a restaurant or whatever, or you're doing some sort of like spreadsheet or email or something like that, marketing, things like that, not like actually building things. And that's mostly gone off elsewhere because the U.S. is the reserve asset of the world. It's the dominant currency. So because of that, you have to pay the people in the U.S. more. And the further away you're from the money printer, the less you have to pay. So you can get the same labor in China for like 1/10 of the price than the United States. So of course, all these companies are leaving, and that's been sort of like a big decline and a big issue politically for the last 50 years. And really, Trump is, I think, one of the only ones that was actually like trying to bring that or had that on his agenda the last 12 years or so. Like he actually wanted to bring manufacturing back, and he's actually trying that with tariffs because he doesn't really have any other tools. If you're going to protect manufacturing within your own borders, there are really only two tools. You can use capital controls, right? Like you force the companies that are within your borders to say, okay, if you want to take capital out, then you're going to have to pay all these taxes and stuff, and you can't leave. Or currency debasement, right? Which is essentially like a way of saying, okay, we're going to make our currency worth less so that our labor is cheaper, so we can attract more manufacturing. Neither of those are really options for the U.S. because it has the world reserve currency. You can debase your currency, and they have, but you can't do it more than the others because then you're kind of racing to the bottom, and no one's going to trust the world reserve currency if you're debasing faster than everybody else, and they'll look for something else. So and you can't do capital controls because you have to export the dollars to get everything back. So what else is there? Well, tariffs are about the only other option you have, right? At that point, if you want to bring manufacturing back, you have to say, okay, well, all right, we're going to incentivize building here by putting in these tariffs. So that's part of the the overall sort of like trying to unbreak what broke in 1971 through the means that he has. Honestly, like if you really want to bring manufacturing back, I think you have to like get back on a sound money standard. The gold exchange standard wasn't exactly sound, but you get onto something more sound, then things will equalize a lot faster. But that's not something that the Trump administration is willing to do. And I don't think they do understand Bitcoin and crypto to some degree, but I don't think they really understand what's going on monetarily. And or they do, and they don't want to give up sort of that mantle of being the world reserve currency because it is an exorbitant privilege, right? Like you can get a lot of stuff essentially for printing dollars, although the rest of the world isn't as willing to go and take those dollars. They're not really buying treasuries anymore. They're actually kind of dumping them on the market whenever they can to sort of counteract some of the tariffs and stuff. It's all kind of a confused mess at this point as to what's happening because the whole system is like just way too complex for any one person to be like, okay, if I do this here, then I'll get the result I want here. So you have so that's one part of it. The other global macroeconomic stuff is all kind of war related. You have conflict in Ukraine. You have conflict in Palestine. There's the Houthis in Yemen, and possibly like something with Iran, and you have Pakistan and India. The thing is, they're all like really far away, and there's I mean, you can sort of like do something with them, but that the era of like the US being sort of the world's policeman, I think, is kind of passing. To some degree they kind of need to, because you do have Pax Americana, and among other things,
Mm-hmm.
what Pax Americana does is it provides security for all those shipping lanes, right? Like, so you get quick cheap delivery of Chinese manufactured goods coming through the West Coast ports and stuff like that, at like where, to the point where you can buy a shirt for like $10 and they spent like 9 cents on transporting it from China, right? Like it's that it gets insanely cheap.
Wow.
To do that, because that's how cheap shipping has gotten with all of the security and stuff. But if you take that role of the US away, then suddenly like all of that gets way more expensive. You have piracy and goods loss and stuff like that, and then insurance rates go up. And we kind of saw some of that with when the Houthis were starting to attack some of the ships that were going around the Suez Canal. So they just went around the Cape of Africa. I forget, like Cape.
Cape
they
Town, like the
went
Horn of
all
Africa,
the
or
Horn of
at the
Africa.
bottom.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
the insurance, because they wouldn't insure going through that like little area where the Houthis were attacking, or the rates were too high. So like you can kind of imagine, like if you took away sort of like the U.S. naval supremacy of all the trading lanes, how it would completely kind of collapse the entire global trading system that we're on. So, in a sense, like there's a lot of moving pieces that the Trump administration has to take into account. Because if we do get into a global war with Russia or China or whoever, then okay, how are you going to manufacture all this stuff? And what's that going to look like? And like all of this international shipping just like almost suddenly stops, because you have belligerents or whatever, and insurance rates for all of that stuff goes up, and like the tariffs will look like nothing compared to the price of goods coming from overseas, once you have shipping lanes that are being
World War
like
III going on.
like something goes on in those. So it's balancing a lot of these things. I don't know if I would call it like 4D or 5D chess. It's just trying to make little things, preparing for what they perceive to be inevitabilities. And that's where you get kind of these weird, weirdly incentivized policies where, you have tariffs, and you have, like you're trying to make peace here, and you're being a little more belligerent there, and on trade policy. Like it's trying to balance all of these, sort of possibilities, right? And that's I don't envy those positions at all. There's a lot of people like to play armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback. It's like, oh, I should have done this. Like there's just so many variables to balance and figure out, and this is honestly the problem of central planning, right? It's trying to figure out, okay, how do we make everything that we want happen and none of the bad stuff happen? Well, yeah, like you're going to make mistakes because you don't have all the information, and you don't know how things are going to play out. And it's generally a lot better if you have individual actors making smaller decisions based on their own economic incentives than a central governing body that says, hey, we're going to do all this for everybody or whatever. But that's unfortunately the situation that we're in, and that's what they're trying to do. And to be fair, every administration tries to do this. This one in particular, I think, is a little bit better in the sense that they're trying to reverse, again, like what's been happening since 1971. So credit to them for that. I just don't think they really have fuller grasp of Bitcoin that they need to understand that, okay, we kind of do need a reset. And if you do want to get rid of the administrative state, if you do want to get rid of all the grift, and if you do want to have more jobs in the US and more manufacturing and stuff like that, you're going to have to get on a sounder money standard. You're going to have to get rid of a lot of these regulations and things like that are really more for the incumbents and so on, that have proliferated as a result of fiat money, like zombie company lobbying and so on. And that's not, they're not really there yet. I mean, maybe Robert F. Kennedy is there. The way he was talking about Bitcoin, he seemed to really get it. I don't think like Trump gets it, for example, quite yet. I don't know if you heard his speech at last year's Bitcoin conference.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was bad, right? Like he just
left a
didn't
lot on the
get it
table.
at all. Yeah. I mean, like he was saying stupid stuff like, "Hey, under my administration, Bitcoin went up 3,000%, and under Joe Biden's, it only went up 50 or something." Like, okay, I don't think you understand how this works, and it's not really a reflect. You didn't do anything to make Bitcoin price go up. So there's a lot of that I think needs correction. I think maybe if you do get like two more terms after this one of like JD Vance or something, he's a guy that I feel like could possibly get it and understand it. At which point maybe we do transition over to a sound money standard. But like at least by my perception of the global macroeconomic stuff that this administration is doing, they're really just trying to manage the decline to some degree and figure out how do we sort of get back some of the mojo that we had pre 1971. And they're trying different things. I suspect a lot of most of it I don't think will work that well, but I mean they're trying, right?
Yeah, they definitely are. It's not for a lack of trying, I guess. We'll that's for sure. No. So speaking of trying new things or reset, reversing things, when do you think they reverse course? And I guess again, they're fighting like they're two different entities in a way, which they are, I guess. But they're the Federal Reserve and Trump, right? It's Powell and Trump going back and forth. When do you see this? Because it looks like this. Hey, day one they had a plan, obviously, like kind of I'll call it controlled demolition, quote unquote, right? They're going to come in and we're going to start re-engineering the way we've been operating to what you've been saying, Jimmy. So like now at some point, it feels like we have all this debt. The debt's continually piling up. You can't refinance these debts over any more really long periods of time with the higher rates. So at what point to you does it feel like they're going to reverse course and, hey, the printers are back on, rates are coming down type of thing? I mean, the dollar's already weakening, but like, when does it feel like, okay, the reverse course is coming and is, so I would love for you to unpack your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I suspect the Trump administration actually wants the dollar to get weaker because if you do want to manufacture in the U.S. and have any sort of export market, what you want to do is have a weaker dollar so that you can sell it more abroad. And if you have a weaker dollar, then it's less profitable for foreign entities to be selling stuff into your market. This is part of the currency debasement, right? This is how you bring manufacturing back. And this is part of it. And I think he would be thrilled if Jerome Powell agreed with him and started lowering rates. And, whatever inflation boogeyman that Powell sees, I suspect Trump would be okay with it, even if it does do that. You get higher prices and stuff like that, because then you at least bring back jobs. You get something for it. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know, because I don't know really like what Jerome Powell is thinking. I'm not in his head, or even like the board of governors or whatever.
You're not
but
a mind reader?
that's sort of yeah. I mean, but that's a situation we're in, right? Is you have two conflicting sort of policies, or what they see as sort of like the most evil thing in the economy and so on. I do suspect, though, that Powell will cave at some point. If not, then Trump will figure out some way of getting him out of there. But I mean, this points to like the stupidness of the Federal Reserve. It's supposed to be an independent entity. It's not exactly public. It's not exactly private. It's this sort of like fourth branch of government essentially that
Yeah.
determines what's going to happen in the economy. And it's an anathema, right? It shouldn't exist in a normal democracy, but it has since 1913, and they've done a lot of damage, I think, to the United States and all over the world by sort of having this, and it allows for the growth of the administrative state. It allows for deficit spending. It allows for like basically politicians spending money like drunken sailors rather than like having trying to be fiscally responsible, and that's an unfortunate reality that's trickled down to every other entity in the U.S. as well, right? Like every company is basically running on the same playbook where they'll live on debt instead of profits or whatever. That's essentially what all zombie companies are. They're not really making that much profit anymore. A lot of these, uh, and you get even households that are living all paycheck to paycheck and living on debt and credit cards or whatever. If you're super poor, or loans against the property that you own that you're going to give up at the end of your life and leave the rest stuff to your heirs or whatever. And they have all these like tax loopholes and stuff to make that more advantageous to those rich people. But I mean, this is the essential, brokenness of the fiat system, is that you have a lot of people that are um, that control things that really shouldn't, and they're central planning things that and have to make these giant decisions that affect everybody, rather than having individuals like make
Yeah.
decisions for their own benefit. Instead, they pick winners and losers by upping or lowering interest rates, or changing this policy or changing that policy. And that's this is why the founders wanted a very minimalist constitution, because or a minimalist government, because they saw that whatever policy you make, you're going to be picking winners and losers regardless. And that's it's unfortunate, but that's crony capitalism is basically what we have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's funny, you kind of alluded this to it earlier, but that is the fiat system. I mean, you write about this in your book, Fiat Ruins Everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you've talked about for over a decade. It's the fiat system. You're forced to mind read. It's like that's what we started this little question. You're like, oh, I'm not in his head, and it's like that's what you're forced to do. All of us in this system is mind read. What's going to happen. I got to become whatever my occupation is, and I got to become an investor and mind read Jerome Powell. It's wild. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's hilarious though, right? Like whenever he
You have to
testifies in
laugh.
front
You
of
have to.
Congress, like they're like, okay, he took a little pause before he said something. That means that or whatever, and then like markets go crazy because everyone is trying to mind read this one man,
Literally.
right? It's like just okay if he does, he's indicating this or whatever, and
Scratched his head.
But that's the rate of money printing is basically what he controls with that interest rate, and yeah, that's where
scary.
we are.
It's scary. All right. So great transition to price here. I would love for you to unpack your thoughts on price. I mean, obviously, like again, we've briefly touched on it, but just there's so many things going on, and just people feel like, why, are things suppressed? Like, what's going on? Is there paper Bitcoin? Like everyone's just all over the place, and everyone feels, Samson's like, I should be at 200 right now. Let's go into $1 million this cycle. So, what are Jimmy's thoughts on where we're at right now? I mean, we're over $100,000. I was talking to Pierre like a month ago, and he was just like, I mean, if we were like $1,000, I'd be like, yeah, like there's something weird going on. But like, yeah, at the time we were at like 85,000. He's like, it's at $85,000. So I would love for you to unpack, your thoughts on this, and and just are we going to where are we headed this cycle, but also like what do you see by the end of the decade?
Yeah, and it's always kind of a tricky thing trying to like predict Bitcoin price, because
I know
one side of the equation, right? We know the supply. Where's price? Well, price is where supply meets demand, right? On the margins. So we don't know the demand, and honestly, like one or two players make all the difference. If we get a strategic reserve bill passed in Congress, that's 1 million Bitcoin over the next 5 years. That's more than like all of the Bitcoin that get mined from 2024 to 2028, right? By like
Yeah.
a lot, right? So
Yeah.
that would obviously create a significant price rise, just because that's a lot of Bitcoin that gets acquired. But if that doesn't happen, and I don't know, maybe like Michael Saylor goes to jail or something, and they sell off his Bitcoin, I don't know. Like that would obviously be negative for price. So it's really hard to predict on a short term basis what the demand is going to be. What we do know is that long term demand increases as people trust it more, right? So we've had 16 years of history, very different than when I began, when it was like 3 or 4 years of history, right? And then now we're at 16. Once we hit 20, I think you get like a different class of people, people that are a little more serious and less about gambling. 30, 40 years, then like that. At that point, I think it's pretty much everybody. But you also have people dying off, and
Hmm.
new workers coming into the market with savings that they want to store and so on. So it's a bit hard to predict. I do think that, like, based on history and the halving being uh, the choke off for supply, at least that part of the equation suggests that if there's even a little bit more demand, it tends to go up in price a lot more, just because there's less Bitcoin coming onto the market, right? And that in itself creates its own frenzy, which in turn means that the Bitcoin price goes higher. And if that happens, then I would expect Bitcoin to get significantly higher than where we are now. Whether that means 250 or a million, I have no idea. But at some point in the next year or so, I expect Bitcoin price to get a lot higher. Um, but yeah, it's again very hard to tell, and the and it's not an easy thing to be like, okay, well, Bitcoin should be valued at this price right now. Well, what metrics are you using? Because it's not like a stock where you can be like, okay, what's the discounted future cash flow of this
Hmm.
business, and like what's the profit margin on this or whatever. That's not how you value Bitcoin, right? So um, that suggests that you have some valuation metric for Bitcoin, and if you have that, then you need to lay out those assumptions too. And that's something that I've been thinking about, and I suspect it's about how many people that are trusting it to plan in the future, right? Like and it's really like the way that comes out, I think, in the Bitcoin community is that it's the long-term holders that determine the price. And the more long-term holders, right, the people that trust Bitcoin to hold value over a long period of time, those are the people that ultimately decide where the price goes. And as long as you have more and more of those people, the price will keep going up. But then you have like sort of speculators um, and things like that change it. What's different this cycle, I think, is that you have corporations, not just people, and possibly governments that are thinking the same way. And the nice thing about like MicroStrategy is that they're not the speculator. They are holding it for the long term. Whereas somebody like Elon, he like bought $1 billion of Bitcoin and sold a bunch of it like the next month,
Hmm.
and that's more the speculator. And I think we'll get a lot more of the holder, because they're the ones that determine the price. So yeah, at least that's where I see it going. I could be wrong, but that's my sort of like rudimentary pricing model for Bitcoin is how many people trust it to hold value over the long term, and the more people that trust it, the higher the price goes.
like you said, it's hard to quantify that necessarily, obviously. So that's, would it surprise you? Samsung's like, it's gonna be 1 million this year, and all this.
Mm-hmm.
Would it surprise you if it was at 500 or 1 million in the next year or two, or sometime this cycle? Would that be like, oh wow, never saw that coming, or is that something like, oh yeah, like that kind of like fits my mental model?
Yeah, it does fit my mental model
Yeah,
because I even like 100,000 seemed like so crazy. When I first got into it, right? I
yeah,
mean, 2011 when I first
it's
read
wild.
about it, Bitcoin had just reached $1, right? So
Jeez,
at that point, it was just like, okay, like $200 just seems so out there. Then two
hmm
years later, it was like $200, and then it's like, oh, $2,000 just seems so out there. 4 years later, it was like $2,000. It was like 10,000 just seems way out there. Like 6 months later, it was $10,000. So like every time you think that a number is unreachable, Bitcoin just reaches it, and you're like, yeah, this is normal. You get used to it so quick that it's
That's so
hard to
true.
remember how uh, unbelievable those numbers seemed. Who knows? At some point, it might reach 10 million, right?
Mhm.
And we might be having this conversation 10 years from now and being like, yeah, that 10 million, it just didn't seem like at all possible. That just seems so ridiculous, but it's 10 million now. we
Yeah.
might be very well saying that. And that's the thing about Bitcoin. Like you don't know. And part of it is you know it does have that kind of upside, and the upside shouldn't be surprising you. And you just sort of plan with that possibility in mind. So if you think it's going to be a blow off top, then you're going to uh, act a certain way. If you think it's a slow and steady rise, you're going to act another way and stuff. So I mean, that's, I think, what more people are interested in, honestly, than the actual price of what it's going to be on when. It's more, okay, well, like, how do I time things? And that's why
hmm
price videos are so popular. Um, but it's I would encourage people to think more about the model of why the Bitcoin price goes up, because if you can figure that out and you can see it growing, then you're going to have more diamond dish hands, right? Because if you see more people actually storing value in Bitcoin, and you see evidence of that, say the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill gets passed, then okay, that's somebody that's holding for 20 years, right? By
hmm
statute or something like that. That's a very strong signal, and that would be okay. Like we got to go do something, or I'm going to plan with that in mind, rather than sort of, hey, it went up, it went down, whatever. Like there's a basis for this stuff, and that's the more important thing than the actual price.
Yeah, and it's we're all normies in that regard, right? Like everyone wants to see the number go up. That's why the price videos, even in Bitcoiner world, are so popular. They're popular in fiat world, popular in this world, because that's ultimately, we're humans. So it's, what if someone just getting in now? Because again, like, I
Hmm.
mean, number one, I guess, how much adoption do you think there really is, and just kind of off the cuff, but also like, what should the average person, because there are so many people that are really not in Bitcoin yet, to any large degree, what should the person be aiming for? Is it, it was, a certain amount, then it's, the 6.15 American hodl, right? And then it's like, it keeps like, now it's point 0.1 or, 0.001, to retire and get a Malibu mansion. Like what should the average person be striving for right now as they're continually saving and trying to convert to sats?
I mean, I would say it depends on your situation, but mostly like save whatever long term money that you can in Bitcoin, right? Like if you have something for emergencies or whatever, I mean, I get that needs to be a little more liquid, but think of it as a 5 to 10 year investment and put whatever you can in there. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't get all of these people that are putting money into something other than Bitcoin, like startups and stuff like that. I mean, maybe there's some degree of I want to see the ecosystem grow or whatever, but like nothing compares to Bitcoin in terms of return. And the more I look at other stuff, I'm like, why would I buy that? Why would I invest in this if I have Bitcoin? And this is, obviously many years of being in it and seeing it, but the compound annual growth rate is just unbelievable. And yeah, there might be situations where you get like a short-term thing that does better than that, but generally Bitcoin does really, really well. So like my strategy has been like, I'm like just keep Bitcoin, and everything else is like kind of garbage compared to it.
What do you, so I think this is a really fascinating question. Like the the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate, like you just alluded to in essence,
Uh-huh.
say it's, we'll call it 60%, a year right now. When does it make sense for you to jump back into that traditional world? Maybe it's buying a Walgreens, a triple net lease, or it's a apartment complex, or something like that. When does it make sense for you, in just in your mind, to be like, you know what, maybe it slowed down to the point where maybe it's again 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're like, you know what, I'm jumping. Like, what is that? When is that point where you're like, kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to start venturing maybe into that new business, or a limited partner in some other, someone wants to raise money, and I'll throw you some. What is that? When does that make sense for you in your mind?
When I can see returns that are better than Bitcoin. So if we're in a Bitcoin denominated world, and you can show me that you're going to make a profit in Bitcoin, and
Mm-hmm.
not a small amount, because obviously there's downside risk,
Yeah.
then I think at that point that I would consider it, especially if it's like really a business that I think is necessary and moral and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and and I mean, there are things that I want. I see them more as consumables. Right now, like housing is seen more as like an investment rather than a consumable. I see it as a consumable. So yeah, you can go and buy an apartment complex and rent it out or whatever, but you're just kind of buying yourself a job, right? Like you now have to be a landlord, and you have to hire all these people or management company and pay these people out and do all that stuff. I have no interest in that. Bitcoin's great because I just have to make sure that my coins are secure, and that's it, right? Like I don't have to go and deal with like water main break or something, and like near a property I own or whatever. Um, and I think that's a better mentality to have, because money is money, but everything else, it's just sort of, I get what I want, and here's what I'm willing to pay, instead of doing this weird calculation. Okay, well, I can get this much by selling it later with these improvements or something like that, which is, I think, the fiat brain again, right? Like where people are uh, have to think of everything as an investment rather than something that they're enjoying or consuming or something like that. So, um, yeah, like that's, I think, a healthier mentality for me, because then I'm not like, I don't know if you've had this phenomenon, but you'll get something nice, and I don't know, you'll keep all the like clear plastic on it and stuff like that, just so
Mm-hmm.
it has better resale value. I stopped doing that because, in a sense, I recognize, okay, if I were storing value in this thing, that would be dumb, because I should be storing money in Bitcoin and not in this consumer electronic thing. I like, and that's we get into that mentality because just fiat money just debases so fast that you don't have any room to think about, or you're always thinking about resale value and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just consume, right? Like it's easier. I don't have to think about a lot of stuff, and it makes your life simpler.
I was just going to say simplification. Boy, oh boy, that just screams simplification, which is amazing. Quieting your mind, right, and just being more
Mhm.
present. Are you a believer in that hash rate leads price, or price leads hash rate?
I suspect it's price leads hash rate, and we've seen this phenomenon happen with gold and stuff. There are certain oil as well, where whatever the price is, then certain things become more profitable to go and get. Other things not. So when oil was like pretty low, I think hydraulic fracking was not profitable for a lot of those. So some of them went bankrupt, but you didn't see as much production of it. Whereas as oil price goes up, then you see more of that stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just sort of the nature of commodities in general, is that the price determines what people are willing to go and do. Now, that's not to say that there aren't miners that mine at a loss sometimes. They have long-term contracts and they have to use up the energy that they're getting anyway, so they'd lose even more money if they shut their thing down. Um, but with respect to hash rate, it generally does tend to be close to the price. I don't know what it is now, but if there's any displacement, it tends to even itself out.
When do you think people will no longer accept dollars for Bitcoin? Like when do we go no bid and people are just like, yeah, I'm not taking that. I'm not taking that fiat trash, that toilet paper. I'm not taking it for your Bitcoin. When, in your mind, when does that happen?
When the U.S. government stops issuing dollars, I guess. I mean, I think as long as the government, because the controller of the dollar is the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, some combination of those, and as long as they're around, you can. It has some utility, right? You have to pay taxes in it, or you can pay taxes in it, and so on. So, I think as long as that's available, there will be an exchange rate. Now, there are going to be merchants that just won't take um, dollars. I mean, I'm a merchant like that now sometimes, right? Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want your dollars. I want Bitcoin. Now,
Great point.
when does that happen? Sort of like generally, I mean, I don't know. Like, if somebody's willing to take it, it kind of has a price, right? So it doesn't go away until the dollar goes away, which yeah, I don't know exactly when that happens, but I suspect it will at some point.
So you're speaking of Samson earlier. When do we have his Omega candle of $100,000 move in one day? Does that happen before a million, or does it happen after we cross a million?
$100,000 in one day. I think it happens before, but I don't know exactly when it'll be because, like, like Bitcoin just does weird stuff around these like nice round numbers, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
once it goes past, it just like shoots past sometimes. And we have had Omega or like the $10,000 candle, and it's speculators and a lot of these are like face ripping rallies where you're liquidating a lot of shorts and stuff like that. So who knows, like how much leverage there will be on the system, especially with all these companies that are providing these like options and things. And I have no doubt that similar vehicles will be coming forth to the financial markets, which will probably make things even more volatile. So yeah, 100,000 in one day, I don't think is unreasonable, and even before a million.
That is the consensus from, I don't even know, maybe half dozen or 10, no, half dozen people I've asked. Most people have said before. So that is
Mm-hmm.
the consensus. Um, so it's interesting, very interesting. Um, what do you think what's something that there's, like, most Bitcoiners aren't even, obviously the core war, stuff like that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room, even political stuff. So we and you and I have just kind of touched on a lot of this stuff. What's something that you have on your mind, or you're seeing, that most Bitcoiners aren't privy to, or they're not thinking about, just maybe in a blind spot or something to that effect?
I don't know if it's a blind spot, but I think sort of like onboarding more of your friends and family, I think is going to become a bigger deal because not all of them are going to be technically competent enough
Mm.
to store their own coin. So that's a project that I've been working on, is sort of like a family bank app for your
Mm.
Bitcoin. So they have an account with you, and you're doing all of the security because you're the Bitcoin guy in your family,
Yep.
but they can have their savings and they can see their balance on their phone whenever they want. They just can't spend any until they talk to you first, right? And then, okay, yeah, you want this money? Okay, then I'll send it here, and you can do it. I think that sort of thing where it's not exactly self custody, right? Because you have to trust somebody, but it's not trusting like a faceless corporation like Coinbase. instead you're trusting somebody that you know and love, I think has a lot of potential. And I'm hoping that something like that can onboard a lot more people onto Bitcoin. So that's something that I've been thinking about. I've been coding some of that, and we'll see where it goes.
That is cool. That's really cool. Well, I can't wait to see more about that. We're, unit cost bias. I was talking again, like I mentioned, to Dr. Jeff, and we were talking about unit cost bias a little bit. And then we were just talking about onboarding family and friends. This is just made me think of this. But do you think that, and then you and I just talked about, 0.1 Bitcoin, retiring on 0.1 Bitcoin is such a big thing right now. And that's kind of where we're at in the cycle, or that's just where we're at 16 years into Bitcoin. It's gotten down to that point, and it just keeps lowering the amount that people need really to be stacking, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But do you think that we will get to a point where we will just start talking in sats? Like, will it just be, because again, like the average person kind of gets confused. I see it all the time. I see it on my channel. I see it in comments. I mean, I'm sure you see it on your content. Like, it's like, well, I can't afford it. It's like, shut up, buddy. Like, can't afford 1 Bitcoin. So like, get out of here. Like, do you think it transitions naturally at some point where it's just we're talking sats and not Bitcoin? Like, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I at some point, I think you do, especially if the dollar is hyperinflating or something like that. But I mean, we don't know when that'll happen. Once the dollar goes away, I think it's that becomes the way people speak about things. But it's hard to know exactly, right? Like, and what that transition will look like. People do have a unit bias for sure. They think 1 Bitcoin costs that much, then I can't afford it, because they want a whole Bitcoin instead of fractions. But I like, this is the thing. Like, it's kind of like the price thing that we were talking about. 10 million Bitcoins just sounds crazy right now, right? But that's only 100x from here. It's not that much,
right?
And we've had several 100x's.
Right.
2013, it was $1,000, right? And 100x from there just seemed ludicrous, but here we are, right? And when Bitcoin was like at $10, $1,000 just seemed ludicrous, but $1,000 came. So in the same way, I think when you're thinking about how much you're stacking and thinking, 0.1 just sounds so little, or now 1 Bitcoin just sounds like so much. Well, way back when, it was like we were joking. At some point, people are going to be like, I finally got a whole Bitcoin. Now people are actually saying that, right? Like, if they get to a whole Bitcoin, they're just like so happy. I still remember, it was like on Clubhouse a while back, and I think somebody was saying like, "Oh, I could have sold this, and I could have had tens of Bitcoin." I'm like, that didn't sound like that much. Like, when I started, right? Tens of Bitcoin was like a few $100s.
Yep.
Tens of Bitcoin as being like this thing that you're striving for, as this, like, the fiat equivalent of like $1 million, right? Yes. Like but that's how this is, right? Because you have exponential growth and stuff. You think 0.1 Bitcoin just sounds like so little. Actually, by the time like 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be like, what? You have 0.1? Like, that's so insane. Like, how can you have 0.1? And you're not even that old, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, it's we did this way back when. So, yeah, it's all relative. I think a lot of people just sort of can't project out what they're going to feel like in the future. And that's, we were talking about empathy earlier. I think it's, you have to empathize with yourself in the future, right? Like, and what you'll feel like, and try to project that out. And that this is honestly like that, the thing that you need to do to figure out, okay, what is the right move now, because how will I feel about it in the future? If you just project out your current feelings, it's probably not going to be correct. And you have to think, okay, like, how is this going to change if it's like $10 million Bitcoin? Then yeah, it's going to sound really crazy, but if that's the reality, then 0.1 Bitcoin is like $1 million. That's going to be a lot of money. Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe the dollar is just so debased. I can barely like buy a house with it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But this is where you have to, sort of put yourself in a position where you can understand what the future will be like, and that's our art of it.
It's amazing. Yeah, we were talking offline a little bit. I want to get into a framing the angle of can Bitcoin fail? We talked about downtime earlier, right? And Bitcoin was 2013 is the last time there was any seconds of even downtime, and just for a tiny bit at that. And Saylor said a few years ago his biggest worry was not that the network, there was an issue with the network, for example, like we were saying, but it was the people. It's a human system. The Bitcoin itself could run for thousands of years, on its own, theoretically, and probably will. But will people adopt it? Will people care about sound money? And then just in the last year, he was on another pod and said that one of his big fears, really, and maybe added to that other fear, was developers getting too cute, developers getting too fancy, people getting impatient, really, in a way, which is what we see, which spurred on a lot of the crypto stuff, just people being impatient and just wanting to move fast and break things, which there's a time and place to do that in life, obviously. But that's kind of the angle I want to hit here with the core wars, what's happening right now. And again, from like the average person, I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners that really don't know what's going on. I know the average normie doesn't really know what's going on. So I'd love for you to start unpacking what's happening here in your thoughts on everything.
Yeah, it's great that you brought up sort of that impatience and sort of Saylor's objection, because I think that's been the case since the beginning, right? The first project that I got involved in 2013 was something called Color Coins, and it was this idea that you can trade other assets on top of Bitcoin by designating certain UTXO outputs as different assets and so on. And that idea had been around for a couple of years up to that point, and I started working on it. But the reason I got involved in that was because I think that was like October of 2013. That summer, I think it was June or July of 2013. Somebody in the Bitcoin community kind of got impatient at the lack of progress on Color Coins. And so they were like, hey, I want to launch, I want more progress, but I'm going to need to raise money. So I'm going to create this token, right? And that token at the time was called Master Coin, right? And they raised something like 5,000 Bitcoin, which even at that time was like a decent amount of money. And they gave out the Master Coins to the funders. And this was, I think, at the time, what was considered a token sale, but what we would call today like the first ICO, right? Like initial coin offering. And they raised it based on that. And they created this system that was basically like Color Coins or whatever. But it was a complete mess. They ended up rebranding later to Omni, which is still around, actually. Funny enough, that was Tether is the main use case for it, right? On the Omni network, but it rides on top of Bitcoin. But it was, but the reason why that guy did it was because he was impatient for some development that he wanted to see in Bitcoin. And later on, Vitalik was also part of the Color Coins project, and he was getting frustrated at Color Coins not happening on Bitcoin. So he also launched his own coin, and it's called Ethereum. And they did launch lots and lots of assets, and he did exactly what he wanted to. Turned out to be a giant scam, but that was basically what he did. And there's a lot of stories like this, right, where people are sort of impatient for.
If you're liking this interview, but you're just wondering, you know what, Brandon, this is amazing stuff, and I get you have these guests on, and they're talking about how orange pilling the world is so great, and how Bitcoin is going to take over the world. How in the world do I educate my family and friends? How do I get people to understand what most people just don't care about, quite honestly? Bitcoin trading cards is the way to do that. When you open up these cards, you see the foil cards, you see the chase, you see the glossy cards, young, old, boy, girl, man, woman, it doesn't matter. People love these cards. It's awesome because they're super valuable, by the way. Amazing little side note. However, it Trojan horses them into the most important thing of the day. It's not politics. It's not all the things that we fight about. It's changing the money, fix the world. Bitcoin trading cards is the best way that we have going in order to do that, no matter who you are. You're going to love them. Playable Characters 10 for 10% off at checkout. Playable Characters 10 off at checkout. btc-tc.com. You're going to absolutely love these things. Now back to the show.
Some sort of change, and when they don't see it happening on Bitcoin, they go and do something else. So 2017, for example, the Bitcoin ABC client, which was Bitcoin Cash, Amory Sachet, created that because he wasn't happy with the rate of progress on like the talks about scaling, right? The big talk then was we should have SegWit or 2 megabyte blocks. SegWit actually doubled the block size also, and that's why you can have 4 megabyte like JPEGs in an inscription or whatever. But he was impatient for that, so he decided to fork Bitcoin with the Bitcoin ABC client, and that ended up becoming Bitcoin Cash. So he too was kind of impatient about it, because he wasn't sure that the actual 2 megabyte hard fork would happen in November, and it actually turned out not to. So that again, that's another sort of like story of somebody that got impatient about a change that they wanted, and creating like their own coin. And this, this is something that has been bandied about with drive chains, for example. A lot of sidechain projects like that tend to be in a similar realm. And almost always they end up like creating their own token of some kind, right? To do something that Bitcoin doesn't do, and almost all of them end up as well. All of them actually have ended up as failures, at least compared to Bitcoin. So it's I guess part of human nature to sort of try to do things yourself if something isn't to your liking, or if consensus is taking too long. Which brings us to the current controversy, which is not honestly, like from a technical perspective, it's like kind of a minor point, right? Like it's about this op return output, and it's an output that that is allowed in a Bitcoin transaction to put sort of arbitrary data into a transaction output. It's obviously unspendable because it's required to have a zero value output. So the amount in it is 0 sats, right, in that transaction output. So you can't spend it. And it's got some message. It's usually just op return and then some string of some kind. And it's allowed to be up to 80 bytes. The reason why they put that on there was actually from way back in the color coins days. This was, I think Counterparty was like the response to Mastercoin before Ethereum came along, and they used, I think, op return, and I think Mastercoin might also have used op return to do some of that. But that is where you could put arbitrary data and you can anchor different things or whatever. And we've limited it at 80 bytes. I think initially it was like 40, and then we increased it at some point to 80. And the reason to do that was to, like not make sure there wasn't spam, right? Like if you made it unlimited, then, somebody could put like
throw whatever.
10,000 bytes or something, right? And we didn't want to do that. So it was limited to 80. But since then, we've had SegWit, we've had Taproot, Softworks, and there were a bunch of people that were putting inscriptions in, for example, right? Like putting entire JPEGs into a single thing and paying miners a lot of money to do it. You had like BRC20 and all these other sort of like pseudo color coins protocols. Well, I guess they are color coins protocols that use that op return. And they were going directly to the miners because they're allowed to be in the blocks, but if you try to use your own Bitcoin node to send it, your Bitcoin node won't propagate it, right? And even if you did propagate it to other nodes, they're not going to propagate it. So it never really gets to the miner. So you have to like work directly with a miner. And usually it's a mining pool, and they have like ways to accelerate it. There's something called Slipstream where you can like pay via Lightning. I think there's another one where you can just pay with like a credit card to get your transaction in or something like that. Basically, you have to work with a miner to get some of these non-standard transactions in. And because of that, the logic is that, well, if these people can put in random data, especially to the UTXO set, which would be harmful for running nodes, then we should just and they can work with a miner anyway. Let's give them this op return space, which was where it was designated to put arbitrary data, and make it unlimited. And that's sort of like the current controversy, is that they're removing this limit, and there's a lot of people that are saying, well, okay, why are you removing the limit? Because I don't want this in my mempool, and it's my node. And they're even like, at least one, there's two pull requests. One not just removes the limit, but removes the option to set the limit, and the other one is removes the limit and keeps the option to set the limit, but calls it deprecated, which means that in a future version the option will go away. So those are the two pull requests, and neither has been merged. But the idea is that you remove this limit so that essentially the spammers can use that instead of some other field like the UTXO or something like that, and the script pub key, which gets stored in the UTXO set, which would bloat the UTXO set. And the UTXO set is very important for running a node, because that's how you can verify a transaction. One of the things that that Bitcoin solves is a double spend problem. Well, the UTXO set is how you figure out it hasn't been double spent. If it's in there, if it's in the UTXO set, then it hasn't been spent yet. So that's how you could quickly verify a transaction, by looking at that. So it ends up being that's a current controversy, is whether or not to remove this limit. The core developers that have been proponents of this have been basically saying it doesn't stop anyone that's determined to go directly to the miner and do this anyway. So we might as well remove it, so that the people running nodes get better fee estimation, they get better better idea. They get faster block propagation, especially with compact block relay, which is a little bit inside baseball. But basically, whenever your node receives a block, you can receive the entire block, which can be up to 4 megabytes, which is a lot of data to be transferring. Or you can you get a compact block relay, and you can sort of reconstruct the block on your own and verify everything. And if you don't have some of those transactions in your mempool, then you have to go and ask somebody, which might take longer. So they're like, well, for fast syncing, for less bandwidth usage, for better fee estimation, it's better to remove this limit. And for the other side, it's basically, hey, like, I don't want this in my mempool, and I want to make it as difficult for the spammer to spam as possible. And and I'm willing to like take more of the my bandwidth or resources or whatever savings that I'm getting in these things. I'm willing to forego that so that I screw over the spammers. And that's basically the argument. I mean, there's a few more small things like the fact that the miners that are directly getting paid for these transactions are making more money than, let's say, the miners like a home miner that doesn't do that. So they're like, okay, well then if it's in the mempool, then you can mine that too and have the option of getting more profit. Which, I mean, I kind of get, but most home miners that I know are like anti-spam, right? So they don't want that, and they mine not for profit but out of principle. So I don't know. There's a lot of different things at play here. Hopefully I've steel manned the other side or both sides, because and but that's the controversy. And yeah, it's a pretty big split right now. I think one of the reasons why it's become such a big deal was because the original pull request that also took out the option um, was locked, and they started kicking people out of the comments as sort of like a moderation thing, which I get, right? Like you don't want like people brigading any sort of discussion. But then they locked it and made it so that no one could comment, and then they unlocked it. Somebody put an ACK, which means okay, I think this is a good idea, and then they locked it again, which was pretty terrible behavior, right? And I think they've even acknowledged, hey, that was a mistake, and we opened it back up again or whatever. But that caused some consternation, and then the other part is just like the core devs have been unusually aggressive about this particular objection, which is very strange to me because I haven't seen core devs act this way like ever. I mean, maybe a little bit in 2017, but like this is just very aggressive, very dismissive. I mean, in many ways, elitist and presumptuous of users. Calling them like gullible and stuff like that, and saying, "Oh, they're switching to knots, and like you shouldn't do that because, or you shouldn't be deceiving users into running knots or something," as if like the users that are running knots have no agency or something. It's just there's some of that which I think has rubbed a lot of people very wrong, and then there's this other part with Citria, and they're which kind of kicked off this whole thing because they apparently need like 130 bytes to put somewhere on the blockchain into a transaction in case of sort of like massive failure on whatever system that they're building. And if they can't put it in op return because it's only 80, so their plan was to make it like part of the script pub key of a UTXO where they can put whatever, and in that case it would go into the UTXO set. Core devs were like just like don't do that. We'll just drop the limit instead. So there's some of that too, and accusations of Citria sort of being behind this pull request and this entire thing. So yeah, it's a big mess, and like most conflicts in Bitcoin are. But yeah, I'm optimistic. I actually like conflicts in decentralized systems, largely because, at least as far as I've seen, those tend to cause the price to go up. And this is an interesting pattern. 2013, there was like all that color coin stuff going on, but it was also like the criticism from the mainstream was that Bitcoin was just like darknet money, right? And October 1st 2013 was when Ross Ulbricht was arrested, and from that point on, from that day, next 6 weeks, it went from like 120 to $1,100, like one of the greatest bull runs that Bitcoin ever had. 2017, we obviously had the block size wars. That was a lot of conflict, and there were people saying, "Oh, this is going to go down." People are going to be confused about what Bitcoin is. You're going to have Bitcoin 1, Bitcoin 2, blah blah blah. Didn't turn out that way. Like August 1st was when SegWit activation started getting signaled, and that was also when Bitcoin Cash launched. And that day, I think it was like 2,300. I think 3 months later, it was like 19,000. So that was another huge bull run. 2021, we had like the BitBait Bit9 war, and that's like, if you think that what I just described was inside baseball, that was even deeper inside baseball. But that also caused like the price to rise. So I'm not afraid of conflict. I actually think it's healthy for a decentralized system. And anyone that tells you, hey, like this proves that Bitcoin can't make decisions, it's like, no, that's just how decentralized systems work. There are going to be disagreements and things, and we might get extra clients that aren't Bitcoin Core out of this, or more contributors to knots or whatever. I think those are all healthy things. And we'll see how it all plays out. But like, yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks on this particular controversy.
Yeah, it really has. I was on vacation for a few weeks, and I was kind of unplugged. I came back. I'm like, what in the world's going on? It's one of those, like, I feel like every Bitcoiner has that moment where they kind of check out for a week or two or whatever it is. They come back and like, what? Did the world burn down? Like, what's going on? Really, really quickly, spend 30 seconds on just for the average person. We've got a lot of people that watch that are, they don't have the knowledge that you do. Well, can you explain UTXO really quick and what that means? And also, why is it important that the data set, why is it important that it stays small and we're not bloating the time chain?
Oh, yeah. Well, the UTXO set specifically. So the UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. So every Bitcoin transaction has inputs and outputs, right? Inputs are the coins that you're allowed to spend, and outputs are where you're sending the coins. If you add up all of once it's spent, it can't be spent again, right? That's part of the rules of any ledger. Is that if you have an unspent, if you have a transaction output that's been spent, it can't be spent again. So after it's been spent, you kind of need to you can archive it, but after that, you don't really need to care that much about it. But the unspent ones you need to keep track of, because any new transactions that come in, the inputs are the outputs of previous transactions, right? These are unspent transactions that have been assigned to your private key, right? And that's you're allowed to spend it because you know the private key, everyone else doesn't. So it's been assigned to your public key. Sorry. So that's how you can spend these coins. And if you actually add up all of the amounts in the UTXO set, well, that's exactly like the amount of Bitcoin that exists, which currently is 19.8 million. Eventually, it'll be 21 million. But that's all the sort of like live Bitcoin that's available to be spent.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to keep that around as from a software perspective, because new transactions are coming in all the time, whether it's blocks only or transaction only. When you get a new transaction, you want to check for its validity, right? Is this a legitimate transaction that can be spent? Is this legal within the state of this Bitcoin ledger? And part of that is checking the UTXO set. Okay, well, does this actually unlock this this previous transaction, and are the amounts correct for this transaction, and so on? There's a bunch of other checks. But that's what every transaction that you get, that's what you do as a node is you check that. And if you get an entire block, you check every transaction in that node, and you do that. Now, you want to keep that relatively small so that you can run the software, right? Because honestly, what you're doing by checking every transaction is you're auditing the entire ledger, right? Like you're being your software is being sort of like an accountant, making sure, okay, the inputs are right and the outputs are right. And this is what keeps the entire Bitcoin system decentralized, because everyone's checking everything. There's no cheater, right? There's no embezzler that's like faking something here and taking a bunch of money and running away with it. Everyone checks everything. So part of that is keeping this UTXO set, and generally, you want to keep it close at hand, right? Because you have to care about it, because all new transactions will be spending something from there. So you need to do that. And any transaction outputs from those new transactions have to be put into this set, and so on. So that's what you do with every transaction, and that's why it's important. If it's too big, right? If the UTXO set is too big, then it requires more resources for your computer. So there's hard drive space, but there's also RAM, and at least some of the UTXO set is typically in RAM or whatever. But that's where you can pull things a lot faster on a computer, and that's where you can say, okay, well, what is this, and how much is it, and so on. Now, if you have a UTXO that is unspendable, right, and there are some that are like that, then to have it in the UTXO set is really terrible, because it's just taking up space, but no transaction is going to come in that's actually spending from it. So it's just kind of a waste of space. And you can kind of create these with certain kinds of transactions. And that's what the core devs are trying to prevent. Now, that said, the UTXO set has grown a lot in the last few years, largely due to inscriptions, ordinals, and stuff like that, because they have like one SAT outputs, and you still have to have them in there. Like even though they're only worth 100 millionth of a Bitcoin, you still have to have it in there in case somebody spends it, right? So now it's like it gets bloated, and the UTXO set has grown as a result of those, and so there's arguments to be made that this will either increase or decrease the UTXO set. Generally, if you combine a lot of those outputs to a single output, then you're shrinking the UTXO set. But if you make lots and lots of output, like you might have one Bitcoin and you split it into 100.01 Bitcoin outputs, then that bloats the UTXO set. So generally it's better if the UTXO set is smaller, just because it requires less resources.
Thank you for explaining that. I think it's important that the viewer, the average person, has context for that. Kind of going back a little bit to governments, obviously we're, Bitcoin's in nation states and the government, and this is now becoming very commonplace. We're starting to see this all over the world. But again, kind of going back to these civil wars within Bitcoin people, some people are, oh, this can't be the way. We can't be doing this. We need more adoption at the low levels. And this was always the way it was going to happen, was it not? I mean, you have to get the Trojan horse inside the gates in order to start dismantling it. Is that not? I feel like, I would love you to unpack this a little bit and your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's always like different factions in Bitcoin, right? And they're the people that I guess like a little bit more empathetic towards the poor people. So they think, okay, well, this is the uprising, screw the banks, people like that, and for them, this is their wish fulfillment fantasy of all these poor people getting into Bitcoin before the institutions and stuff, and then they get all rich and we can screw over the bankers and I don't know, burn them at the stake or something, right? Like that's their dream. And then there's but reality isn't like that. It's never it never quite turns out the way you want it to. But if you've been paying attention to like how things work and you study history and stuff like that, you realize, okay, things have a pattern, right? Like people that are rich didn't get there just by being stupid. I mean, some did, but a lot of them didn't. So it's not like you're going to be able to screw over all the rich people with a particular system. There are always going to be some people that sort of get it and can make the right decisions, even if you don't want them to. So you might not like the CEO of Johnson and Johnson, for example. All right, you might think he's a jerk, blah blah blah, but it's entirely possible he has a couple thousand Bitcoin, right, and nothing you can do about it, right? And they want like a lot of people like that just want Bitcoin to mete out justice for them, right? But it's not going to. I think that's kind of a futile hope. So I would encourage people not to think that way, or to impart on Bitcoin your wish fulfillment, because it is going to take down the current system, but it's not going to be exactly in the way you want. I realize like a lot of banks have screwed a lot of people over. A lot of large companies have done a lot of evil things. A lot of bureaucrats have done a lot of evil things. Yeah, we all want to we
want justice. Yeah.
I mean, we want like Jeffrey F. friends to all like fry, right? Like we want that stuff to happen. But Bitcoin is not the vehicle that makes justice happen, and that's it's just going to be making it more fair, and it's directionally right. And I think directionally you'll get more good than bad, and it'll be better than before. But it's not going to correct everything for you, and it's not going to be the poor rising up against the bankers or whatever. Now that said, like there is some argument to be made. Okay, like what's it good for if it's not helping the poor people? First of all, poor people aren't the only people in the world. There's a lot of people that you could be helping, but it does help poor people, just not every poor person, right? Like, and there's plenty of people that have gotten out of poverty as a result, at least in part, to Bitcoin, right? There's a guy I met in El Salvador. He's like 21 and has like a house, and he's like, yeah, Bitcoin helped me get this, and it's like, and I'm very happy that I have it, and I'm able to house my family. He lives with his parents, and he bought the house, right? Like that's great. You're helping people, right? Rise up, and that's what we really want. Rather than, okay, well, it has to do this or it has failed. That's I think kind of a naive, idealistic, wish fulfillment fantasy kind of way of looking at things, and that's not the right criteria to judge Bitcoin.
So in saying this, the government part and getting inside the gates here, we're there. What the bill, a Bitcoin bill, all these different things here in America that are coming down the pike seemingly. What does it need to have in it for you to be like, wow, that's amazing, like that's huge? What is it? Is it de minimis, capital gains exemptions? Is it legal tender? Like, what does that look like for you in your eyes?
I mean, I'm kind of stoic about this stuff. Like, what's going to happen is going to be what's going to happen, and I don't know exactly. I would if I had it my way, here are the things that I would like to see, like including de minimis and like no capital gains and a bunch of other things. But I mean, honestly, I don't know anything specific that would be like, oh, this is amazing, because I think Bitcoin's already amazing. It's already, I like, my life has been enhanced significantly by having Bitcoin in my life. So I'm nothing but grateful for what Bitcoin has enabled me to do. So anything else on top of that, like de minimis and lack of capital gains tax and stuff like that, would be sort of cherries on top. Like I'm very happy with how things have turned out so far. It can obviously get a lot better, and I hope that they get better, but none of that is just sort of like, okay, we have to have this or Bitcoin dies.
Incredible stuff, Jimmy. Is there anything you want to touch on really quick? I mean, share where people can find you, but also is there anything else you want to touch on? I mean, you did kind of touch on something that you're working on right now, which is huge. But share people where they can find you, and any last comment.
You can find me on X at Jimmy Song. I have a newsletter, jimmysong.substack.com, Bitcoin Tech Talk. A lot of interesting things that I see over the week. I've been publishing it for like 8 years now, so it's been around quite a while. I have other social media stuff, but you can find something. You can find me on those two, and then it can get connected to the other stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me, and go do stuff. You can just do stuff. I think that's like the meme on Nostr. You can just go do stuff.
If you can't get enough of these interviews and you want to deepen your education on sound money, wealth building, and freedom, you're not going to want to miss this playlist here. Happy binging. Check it out now. We'll see you inside.